Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Your vendors often handle your most sensitive data. This presents significant challenges as security, procurement, IT, and privacy teams struggle to vet and manage vendor risks in real time. So, how can organizations proactively monitor vendors to protect against emerging threats? Additionally, how can risk exchanges help organizations manage the third-party risk management lifecycle with more efficiency? My name is Christopher Smith from here at OneTrust, and today in this session, we'll answer these questions and break down how risk exchanges offer a mature approach to vendor risk monitoring. Understand third-party risk management trends and challenges. Gain actionable insights on how to monitor third-party risks and performance. Learn the benefits of a third-party risk exchange, and see how you can protect against third-party threats, such as data breaches. So what's driving the need for vendor risk management? Well, we've got three main drivers that we'd like to focus on today. Starting with new technology. There's been an ongoing shift to the cloud and SaaS-based solutions, resulting in more data than ever. Important to note, data, often viewed as the oil of the digital era, became the most valuable commodity in the world as of 2017. Naturally then, the relationships with those vendors who have access to or control of your company's data are of paramount importance. So with more data and increased numbers of cloud service providers that you do business with, really you increase your chances of breaches. There are several popular stories in the news that everyone should be aware of, where breaches originated from a very unlikely endpoint. So with the breaches come big consequences: reputational damage, trust issues, and impact to your business that reaches far beyond the regulatory penalties that are imposed. We've seen far too many times companies in the news that lose a customer base because they're no longer viewed as trustworthy as a result of some poor practices around data management, privacy, or third-party risk management. And so, these are some of the bigger driving forces in vendor risk management, but also do want to focus on regulations as well, which help to elevate and increase the emphasis on third-party risk. So it's not just consumer trust, but also those regulatory penalties. And here, what we have is a snapshot of popular regulations across the globe. But please remember, there are hundreds of regulations that span the globe. And the unique thing about vendor risk management is that it's in all of these regulations in some form or fashion. It's buried in privacy, security, or even financial regulations. So it's important to be able to figure out what the relevant information or data that's involved with your third-party relationship is. This is proven to be very difficult for organizations that have legacy processes and legacy systems. So this is critical for your organization and certainly worth focusing on going forward. So moving from those drivers now into what make up the exchange and how continuous monitoring should be incorporated. So presently, three methods to manage vendor risk. We have our assessments, our exchanges, and assessments as a service. So with the assessments, sending out questionnaires, reviewing answers, manually flagging risk, things like that. With the exchanges, you've seen an uptick in them as a result of this CEPRO survey, where companies are increasing their adoption of being able to utilize vendor risk profiles to get information out of the box and learn how to prioritize their vendors, utilize pre-completed assessments to decrease the amount of time spent searching and knocking on doors for those responses. And then also getting real-time notifications of things like a breach or enforcements of any third parties that you're working with. And then assessments as a service. Really, I think everyone understands the burden that obtaining completed assessments puts on teams. So being able to offload that work from your team to someone else so that you can focus on the core risk management. And so from there, what we want to then look at is the types of information or the sources that you should consider when looking at an exchange platform to help your organization going forward. So on the left-hand side, the light blue, really focused on proactive research from public and private sources. Do you have scanning technologies, data feeds from authoritative sources? Private sources, do you have any information or subscriptions that you may be subscribed to? And then breach and enforcement notifications, very important when you consider what is happening in the global ecosystem and how rapidly changing things can be when it comes to data and the organizations that handle it. On the right-hand side, what you're going to see are actual vendor contributions. So do vendors provide pre-completed assessments? Are they able to make direct updates to a profile or a page? And then also, can they furnish independent audit reports? Providing that evidence or justification. So saving time on your vendor due diligence, where do you find this information? So in our opinion, it's critical that this information is being centralized. You have that repository where you can see all relevant certifications on the vendor and keep that information up to date. So having a go-to, single source of truth, it's really not that easy in practice to populate or maintain on an ongoing basis. But by utilizing an exchange, you can actually cut down on the time that you spend compiling and aggregating that information. So the benefits that your team or your organization are going to realize is a reduction in time spent trying to gather the information and an overall increased efficiency for your program being able to populate and analyze that information. So when you go through and think about all of the different sources that are available for you to get that information, really, it's just important to understand how much time is spent manually trying to obtain financial or InfoSec data or evidence from these organizations, and utilizing an exchange is a great way to cut down on that time. Also, when you think about the amount of information and having all of that information at your fingertips, another great aspect is the services that you can use. So I mentioned it briefly earlier, but you can use those subscriptions in isolation, or you can pull that information into an exchange. Security rating services have grown substantially in the past 5 to 10 years. But is your company utilizing that in a silo, or is it in tandem with other vendor risk management efforts? The feedback, though, that we've gotten from our customers globally is that when you take those rating services and you take that bit of information, that's just one piece that you need to build out a full vendor profile. So similarly, having other business data feeds really help round out that vendor profile. Maybe you've got an integration or information with DUNS numbers so that you've got relevant financial information up to date. Just one example there. So really though, just to highlight, lots of organizations, subscribe to various services for obtaining information on their data or on their vendors, but they don't necessarily have it connected. So when you put those private sources to work more intelligently for you and your team, that helps drastically cut down on the time spent on the vendor risk management lifecycle. Lastly, from a breach and enforcement standpoint, tons of different breaches, sanctions, compliance violations, regulatory enforcement actions, they all happen all the time. It seems like every time we turn on the news, there's a new organization who's had a new issue related to data privacy, either internally or with a third party. So the point here really is rarely does a company care about one singular thing on this page across jurisdictions, frameworks, industry affiliations. What we see typically is that our customers like to think more in terms of their overall policies. So it's important to consider a solution for vendor risk management that's highly flexible across these jurisdictions and frameworks globally. And we more broadly align vendor risk management programs with those policies that you have in place. So in any regard, it is going to be very challenging regardless of the size of your vendor inventory. But it's worth noting it certainly grows in difficulty and complexity based on the number of vendors that you have to monitor. So how can you really monitor regulatory bodies and sanctions for thousands of vendors across multiple jurisdictions? Well, by using an exchange. And it's just another great benefit of how using an exchange can provide that easy aggregation for you. So there's also flexibility from the chasing side of the house as well. So one of the things that we wanted to highlight today is how chasing services can help complement an exchange or be part of an exchange. So we discussed pre-completed assessments, and the way you're going to be able to access those in an exchange like OneTrust Vendorpedia is by simply selecting a vendor to assess, choosing the standard or framework that you'd like, and after that, OneTrust would then be taking over that process and ultimately returning to you a completed assessment. It's important to note this can be a standard or framework commonly used, or this could even be a custom assessment. And this is being done so that your team can focus on the actual risk management portion and not chasing to obtain a completed questionnaire. Direct vendor updates. Vendors updating and maintaining their own profiles. So these are industry-wide problems that exchanges are helping to solve. Many organizations building out that trust profile is critical, and it's great to utilize a service to help maintain that information. If you're not using Exchange, you need to then go on to vendors' websites and see if they have a trust profile on their own. Go on Google. You can see many organizations will actually put their data processing agreements publicly available online so that you can do the due diligence yourself. But when you consider the number of vendors in your inventory, this may not be feasible from a scale position. And then when reviewing vendors, their credentials and relevant reports, it's important to remember that certifications expire. So how is your organization going to obtain the relevant information needed to complete the vendor profile? It's very time consuming to try and accomplish this manually, especially given the product or service level granularity that comes into play with vendors. By utilizing an exchange, though, you're able to get updates on not only the vendors in question, but also notifications for relevant audit reports or evidence needed by your business. So here's how this information can and should be updated daily for your vendor inventory. Really, one of the great benefits of an exchange and what we're seeing organizations flock to is the ability for you to track changes and monitor those over time. So what were your old values? What are your new values? So having this information updated on a daily basis allows you the confidence that you need to present to the rest of the organization that you are confident in the relationship with your third parties, and that the mutual trust is there for engaging in business further. So lastly, did want to talk to you about OneTrust Vendorpedia, helping to streamline the process of managing your third-party risks. So implementing the third-party risk exchange, storing previously completed common assessments for shared use, also able to send out the request for custom assessments, providing assessments as a service so that your team can focus on risk remediation rather than chasing those assessment answers. Aggregating all of your data and certifications that are publicly available. Vendors also having the ability to update their profiles, make relevant adjustments on the information stored against them. Aggregating all data and certifications that you have available. And then lastly, monitoring breaches that occur with vendors, as well as regulatory updates. So are you able to tie into those data feeds that would ultimately give you access to the information that will round out your assessment of third parties? So in closing, did want to offer up a promotion that we're running right now. Because we know that vendor risk assessments are very time consuming and tedious, wanted to extend this free offer that we're running. Currently, we're offering 10 free and completed vendor risk assessments through our cyber risk exchange, our community of shared vendor risks. And here's how it works. So step one, you will access the exchange where we have profiles on over 60,000 different vendors. Then you're going to choose up to 10 vendors and select your preferred assessment standard. Once you have launched that request, you can then track the progress while our team retrieves the completed assessment on behalf of your organization. And then lastly, once we return those back to you, you're going to be able to see all the assessment answers and get a detailed risk analysis report of the vendor in question. So head on over to vendorpedia.com/free assessments to take a look and take advantage of this great promotion that we're running. Wanted to thank you for your time today. Head on over to the OneTrust Vendorpedia booth to ask any questions or learn more from our team, as well as to claim the 10 free assessments that I was speaking about earlier. Thank you so much. Have a great day.